High Counselor Vexthor's crystalline form shimmered with barely contained amusement as he studied the holographic display before the Galactic Council. The image showed Earth's latest spacecraft, a vessel that seemed absurdly small compared to the massive warships that filled the Council's military docks. This, he gestured dismissively, is what the humans consider their most advanced military vessel, barely larger than our civilian shuttles. His voice carried through the vast chamber, where representatives of 300 spacefaring civilizations gathered for this emergency session. Admiral Zarak, the head of the Council's defense force, stepped forward. Her scaled skin reflected the blue light of the hologram as she addressed the assembly. Our intelligence suggests that Earth has been resistant to accepting protected status within our alliance. They claim to have the right to remain independent, despite their obvious technological inferiority. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Protected status was considered a great honor, a way for younger civilizations to develop under the guidance of more advanced species. No race had ever refused it in the Council's 10,000 years of existence. In the shadows of the chamber's upper tier, Intelligence Director Nara watched silently. Her 6 eyes narrowed as she studied the human vessel's specifications. Something about the design bothered her. It was too elegant, too precise, like a blade honed to its absolute essential form. I propose, Admiral Zarak continued, that we send the Grand Armada to Earth. Not to attack, of course, but to demonstrate the futility of resistance. 100 of our capital ships should be sufficient to convince these humans of their proper place in the galactic order. High Counselor Vexthor's crystalline structure pulsed with approval. The motion is sound. However, Director Naira, you seem troubled. Share your thoughts. Naira descended to the council floor, her movements deliberate. The data doesn't align with our conclusions. Human trade routes have decreased by 70% in the past solar cycle. Their civilian traffic has dropped significantly, yet their resource consumption has increased. Preparing for war? Admiral Zarak scoffed. With ships that size. Size isn't everything, Admiral, Naira countered. Earth's history shows a consistent pattern. They appear weakest when they are most dangerous. Their warfare evolution on their homeworld demonstrates this repeatedly. You give these primitives too much credit, the Admiral dismissed. Their entire fleet could fit in one of our carrier bays. The Council voted overwhelmingly in favor of the demonstration. Only Naira and a handful of others opposed the motion. As the chamber emptied, she accessed classified files on her quantum pad, reports of strange energy signatures near Earth's asteroid belt, unexplained disappearances of pirate vessels that ventured too close to human space, and curious patterns in their resource shipments. Across the galaxy, on Earth's moon, Commander Rajesh Patel stood in the hidden command center deep beneath the lunar surface. Holographic displays showed the positions of Council vessels across nearby sectors. Status report, he ordered. Lieutenant Kira Yamamoto's fingers danced across her console. The Council took the bait, sir. Their Grand Armada is mobilizing. They'll arrive in approximately 7 standard days. Rajesh allowed himself a small smile. And our actual fleet. The nanoswarm is ready, Kira reported. All 10 million vessels are functioning at optimal capacity. Quantum stealth systems are operational, and the AI neural networks are synchronized. The Council's sensors will only detect our decoy ships, exactly as planned. 50 years of preparation, Rajesh mused, watching the holographic representation of Earth's true fleet. A vast cloud of ships, each no larger than a small car, but packed with technology centuries ahead of anything the Council possessed. They expect to find a primitive species with oversized ego and undersized ships. Instead, they'll learn why Earth's ancient predators feared the smallest insects the most. Neural swarm protocols are active, Kira confirmed. The moment they enter our space, they'll discover why humanity chose to build small. In the facility's quantum lab, Dr. Rashid Rahman made final adjustments to the swarm's defensive algorithms. The tiny ships weren't just small by necessity. They were small by design. Each one carried a quantum reactor that could power a city, shielding that could shrug off capital ship weapons, and the ability to form into larger structures at will. The Council's arrogance would be their undoing. They assumed humanity's small ships were a sign of technological limitation. They never considered that after centuries of warfare on Earth, humans had learned the most important lesson of all. In battle, being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. Deep within the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, what appeared to be a routine mining operation suddenly transformed. As automated harvesters pulled away from the rocky surface, entire sections of the asteroid dissolved, revealing vast hangars carved into the space rock. Inside, rows upon rows of tiny ships hung in perfect formation, each one barely larger than an ancient Earth fighter jet. Fleet Admiral Isabella Santos floated through the secret facility, her magnetic boots occasionally touching down on the metal walkways. "Status of Production Facility 7, she asked, her voice carrying through the command center's recycled air. "Final wave of quantum cores is complete," responded Technical Director Raj Patel, his holographic form flickering beside her. "All 1 million ships in this sector are combat-ready, just waiting for your signal to initiate neural sync." Isabella nodded, watching as automated systems continued to assemble more vessels. The tiny ships represented humanity's greatest technological achievement and their greatest deception. While the Council believed Earth was struggling to match their capital ship designs, humanity had chosen a completely different path. "Show me the hive-mind interface," Isabella commanded. The air around her filled with streams of data, showing the neural connections between millions of pilots and their assigned vessels. Each ship in the nanoswarm was piloted by a combination of advanced AI and human consciousness, allowing for reaction times and coordination that would be impossible through conventional means. In a training chamber nearby, Lieutenant Wei Lin floated in a neural suspension pod, his mind connected to a squadron of 50 ships simultaneously. Through the neural link, the vessels moved as extensions of his own body, dancing through a simulated asteroid field with impossible precision. Similar scenes played out in hidden facilities across the solar system, as humanity's real military force prepared for the coming conflict. "The Council scouts have crossed the Kuiper Belt," reported Strategic Officer Amara Okonjo, her dark eyes fixed on the long-range sensor displays. "Their main fleet will arrive in 4 days." Isabella smiled. "And what do their scans show them?" "Exactly what we want them to see," Amara replied. "A handful of outdated ships conducting routine patrols, a few civilian vessels, and lots of mining operations. The quantum camouflage is working perfectly. They can't detect any of our real infrastructure." The quantum camouflage was another triumph of human ingenuity. Based on principles that the Council's scientists had dismissed as theoretical, it bent probability itself around Earth's military assets. To outside observers, the asteroid belt appeared to be exactly what they expected: a semi-developed mining operation of a young spacefaring race. In reality, it was the largest shipyard ever constructed, spreading across thousands of kilometers of space. The resources that the Council thought were being used for mining and civil engineering had instead been transformed into millions of highly advanced combat vessels. "Neural sync test commencing," announced Dr. Elena Rodriguez from her research station on Ganymede. The scientist had spent 20 years perfecting the human-AI interface that allowed pilots to control multiple ships simultaneously. "All pilots, prepare for full immersion." Across the solar system, thousands of trained pilots entered their neural pods. As their consciousness expanded through the quantum network, they became one with their assigned vessels. The tiny ships of the nanoswarm began to move in perfect synchronization, forming and reforming complex patterns that would have been impossible with conventional control systems. "Show me the Morpheus protocol," Isabella ordered, turning to a secure terminal. A hologram appeared, demonstrating the nanoswarm's most closely guarded capability. The tiny ships could combine, their quantum fields merging to form larger vessels. What appeared to be a fragmented, weak fleet could transform into capital ships that matched or exceeded the Council's largest vessels. but with the added advantage of being able to split apart at will. The Council thinks size equals power, Raj observed, his hologram analyzing the simulation. They never considered that smaller units could combine into something greater than the sum of their parts. Just like they never understood why Earth's history was full of examples of smaller, more agile forces defeating larger, more powerful opponents. In her private quarters later that day, Isabella reviewed historical footage from Earth's past conflicts. The defeat of the Spanish Armada by smaller English ships, guerrilla forces overcoming superior military powers, swarms of tiny drones revolutionizing warfare. Humanity had learned these lessons well, and now they would apply them on a galactic scale. "Final system check," she commanded, initiating the encrypted command sequence. Across the solar system, hidden facilities powered up their quantum cores. The nanoswarm hummed with barely contained energy, ready to demonstrate why humanity had chosen to think small. In the outer reaches of the solar system, automated sensors detected the Council's advanced scouts. The massive alien vessels moved with the confidence of absolute superiority, their crews certain they were observing a primitive civilization about to learn its place in the galactic hierarchy. They never noticed the clouds of microscopic quantum sensors that attached themselves to their hulls, providing Earth with real-time intelligence about their capabilities and weaknesses. They didn't detect the test runs of ships so small they could have been mistaken for space debris. And they certainly didn't realize that what they thought was humanity's entire fleet was merely an elaborate facade. "Send word to all commands," Isabella ordered, her voice carrying across the quantum network to every hidden facility in the solar system. "Operation Trojan Horse is now active. Maintain deception protocols until the primary fleet enters the inner system. Let them come to us, thinking they're the hunters." She turned to face the holographic display of the approaching Council fleet. They're about to learn why Earth's history is full of stories about overlooking the small and seemingly weak. Sometimes the deadliest predator is the one you never see coming. The Council's Grand Armada emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, their massive ships casting long shadows across space. 100 capital ships, each one a floating city of metal and energy, moved in perfect formation toward Earth. Admiral Zerak stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dominion, her scaled skin gleaming under the command deck's lights. "Scan the system," she ordered, mandibles clicking with anticipation. "Show me this primitive fleet we're meant to intimidate." The sensor officer, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, pulsed with confusion. "Admiral, I'm detecting only 15 vessels in the entire system. Most appear to be mining ships or cargo haulers. Their military presence is minimal." "As expected," Zerak replied, though something in her ancestral instincts triggered a warning. "Deploy the fleet in standard intimidation formation. Let's show these humans what real power looks like." In the Lunar Command Center, Commander Rajesh watched the Council fleet's approach on quantum-linked displays. "They're proceeding exactly as predicted," he noted to Lieutenant Kira. "Status of the nanoswarm. All units in position," Kira reported, her fingers dancing across neural interface controls. 10 million ships standing by, quantum stealth active. The Council sensors are reading only our decoy vessels." Rajesh nodded, then opened a secure channel to Fleet Admiral Isabella Santos. "They've crossed the outer defense line. Request permission to initiate Phase 1. "Granted," Isabella's voice came through, clear and confident. "Show them why size isn't everything." Across the solar system, hidden quantum reactors powered up. In the asteroid belt, what appeared to be routine mining operations suddenly ceased. Near Mars, seemingly empty space began to shimmer with barely visible distortions. On the Eternal Dominion's bridge, the sensor officer's crystalline form suddenly pulsed with alarm. "Admiral." Energy signatures appearing throughout the system. Thousands of them. "No, millions." "Impossible," Zerak snapped. "Their fleet barely exists. Show me." The main view screen activated, showing clouds of tiny objects materializing from seemingly nowhere. Each one was barely larger than a shuttle, but they moved with impossible precision and speed, forming complex geometric patterns that shifted and flowed like schools of fish. By the first light, someone whispered on the bridge, "How many are there?" Before anyone could respond, the first attack began. A swarm of 10,000 microscopic ships descended on one of the Council's destroyer escorts. The tiny vessels moved in perfect synchronization, their quantum fields merging as they approached. The destroyer's shields flared against what their sensors interpreted as a single massive energy signature. When the light faded, the destroyer was gone, carved into precisely measured sections by quantum-edged weapons that bypassed its shields completely. All ships, battle formations. Zarak roared, but her ordered discipline was already breaking down. The human vessels were too small, too fast, too numerous to track. Traditional targeting systems designed for capital ship combat were useless against opponents the size of ancient fighter craft. In the neural command pod of his ship, Lieutenant Wei Lin guided his squadron of 50 vessels through the chaos. Through the neural link, he felt rather than saw the positions of every ship in his command, moving them as naturally as breathing. His squadron flowed around enemy fire like water, their quantum shields absorbing or deflecting the few hits that came close. Squadron 7. Execute Morpheus Protocol, came the order through the neural net. Wei smiled as his consciousness expanded, guiding his ships into a complex geometric pattern. The tiny vessels began to merge, quantum fields interlocking, until what had been 50 small ships was now a single vessel the size of a Council cruiser. Across the battlefield, similar transformations took place. The Council fleet found themselves facing opponents that could switch from swarms of tiny, untargetable vessels to capital ships and back again at will. Traditional combat doctrine fell apart in the face of an enemy that could literally change the nature of their forces mid-battle. Multiple Council vessels attempting emergency hyperspace jump. Kira reported from Lunar Command. Quantum anchors are in position. The Council ship's hyperspace drives powered up, only to find themselves trapped by fields of quantum energy that made faster-than-light travel impossible. They were committed to this battle, whether they wanted to be or not. "We need to scramble their command and control," Rajesh ordered. "Initiate protocol babble." Throughout the Council fleet, communication systems suddenly failed as quantum-scale ships attached themselves to hull arrays, introducing subtle errors into transmission patterns. The coordinated fleet began to break apart into individual units, each one now fighting alone against an enemy they couldn't effectively target. Admiral Zarak watched in horror as her mighty armada was systematically dismantled by an enemy she had dismissed as primitive. Ships that had survived centuries of combat were being disabled or destroyed by vessels so small they would once have been ignored as irrelevant. "Send the surrender signal," she finally ordered, her scales dark with shame. "Before there's nothing left to surrender." In Lunar Command, Rajesh received the surrender transmission with grim satisfaction. "All units, cease attack. Maintain containment protocols around surviving Council vessels." He turned to Kira. "Send word to Admiral Santos. Phase 1 is complete. The Council's fleet is neutralized." As the battle ended, the true scope of humanity's victory became clear. The Council's mighty armada had been defeated not by matching their strength, but by completely redefining the nature of space combat. They had expected a primitive species with delusions of grandeur. Instead, they had found an enemy who had turned their own assumptions into weapons. The message would soon spread throughout the galaxy. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Their small ships had proven to be exactly what Intelligence Director Nera had feared, not a sign of weakness, but a deliberate choice that had transformed them into one of the most formidable military powers in known space. The emergency session of the Galactic Council erupted into chaos as the news of their fleet's defeat spread through the chamber. High Counselor Vexthor's crystalline form, pulsed with barely contained rage as tactical displays, showed the systematic dismantling of the Grand Armada. Intelligence Director Nera stood calmly in the center of the storm, her 6 eyes focused on the holographic reconstruction of the battle. "As I warned you," she said, her voice cutting through the pandemonium, "we dramatically underestimated human capabilities." "Impossible," one of the military advisors shouted. "Their entire industrial capacity couldn't support a fleet of that size." "That," Naira replied, "was precisely what they wanted us to believe." She gestured, and the hologram shifted to show detailed scans of the human vessels. "These ships aren't just small, they're technological marvels. Each one contains engineering principles our scientists claimed were theoretical." In Earth orbit, Fleet Admiral Isabella Santos supervised the containment of the surviving Council vessels. The nanoswarm had reformed into a complex network around the captured ships, ready to respond to any attempt at resistance. Through quantum entanglement communications, she received updates from listening posts throughout the galaxy. The Council's response, she asked Strategic Officer Amara Okonjo. "Exactly as predicted," Amara replied, studying her displays. "Their secondary fleets are mobilizing, but they're confused and disorganized. Some are calling for immediate retaliation. Others are demanding negotiations. They still don't understand what they're dealing with." Isabella smiled. "Then it's time for Phase 2. Signal all commands. Operation Ghost Protocol is now active." Across known space, hidden human assets began to move. What the Council had believed to be Earth's limited sphere of influence had been another carefully crafted deception. For decades, humanity had been seeding the galaxy with dormant nanoswarm units, disguised as everything from space debris to commercial satellites. In the Centauri sector, a Council military installation suddenly found itself surrounded by ships that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Near the Orion trade routes, crucial hyperspace navigation beacons went dark as quantum-scale vessels altered their transmission patterns. Throughout Council space, their carefully maintained infrastructure began to show signs of widespread but subtle manipulation. Lieutenant Y. Lin, now coordinating operations from a stealth command ship near Alpha Centauri, watched as the Council's military response fell into disarray. Their attempts to mobilize secondary fleets were met with mysterious equipment failures, navigation errors, and communication disruptions. "They still think this is a conventional war," he observed to his AI tactical interface. "They haven't realized that we've been fighting it for decades already." The AI's response scrolled across his mural link. "Human history suggests that wars are won through superior strategy rather than superior force. The Council's paradigm of overwhelming power has become their greatest weakness." In the Council chamber, Naira presented her final analysis to the emergency session. "The humans didn't just defeat our fleet," she explained. "They revealed only a fraction of their true capabilities. Those small ships we dismissed, they can combine into larger vessels, split apart at will, and operate with a level of coordination we thought impossible." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "And now we're detecting similar energy signatures throughout Council space. We haven't just lost a fleet. We've lost our ability to guarantee the security of any installation, any ship, any facility in our territory." High Counselor Vexthor's crystalline form dimmed with realization. "How long?" he asked. "How long have they been preparing this?" "Since the moment we first contacted them," Naira replied. "Every trade mission, every diplomatic exchange, every seemingly primitive vessel, all part of an elaborate deception. While we watched their visible fleet, they were building something entirely different. On Earth's moon, Commander Rajesh reviewed the latest intelligence with satisfaction. The Council's military doctrine was falling apart as they realized the true scope of their vulnerability. Their massive ships, once symbols of unchallenged power, had become liabilities, too large to effectively defend against swarms of quantum-scale attackers. "Signal from Fleet Admiral Santos," Lieutenant Kira announced. "The Council's 3rd and 4th fleets are standing down. Their commanders are refusing orders to engage." Rajesh nodded. The psychological impact of the first battle was spreading through the Council's military hierarchy. No one wanted to risk their ships against an enemy that could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and vanish just as quickly. In her command center, Isabella received the latest updates with grim satisfaction. The Council's political unity was fracturing as different factions argued over how to respond to this unprecedented threat. Some demanded immediate peace negotiations. Others called for full mobilization. A few suggested surrendering to human authority, an ironic reversal of their original intentions. "They're beginning to understand," she told her staff. "Size, numbers, conventional power. None of it matters when your opponent can rewrite the rules of engagement. Every ship they send against us becomes another demonstration of their vulnerability." The quantum communications network brought reports from across the galaxy. Council military installations were going dark, their communications mysteriously failing. Trade routes were being disrupted by inexplicable navigation errors. The massive infrastructure that had maintained their dominance for millennia was proving useless against an enemy they couldn't see or fight conventionally. Humanity's strategy was working perfectly. They hadn't just won a battle. They had shattered the foundation of the Council's military and political power. The message was clear. The era of massive ships and brute force was over. The future belonged to those who understood that true power lay in adaptation, deception, and the ability to strike where the enemy least expected. 1 month after the battle that changed galactic history, Fleet Admiral Isabella Santos stood before the reformed Galactic Council. The chamber had been modified. The towering seats of the old order replaced by a circular arrangement that placed all representatives on equal footing. Above them, a holographic display showed the ongoing transformation of galactic military doctrine. "The age of the capital ship is over," Isabella declared, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Humanity didn't just defeat your fleet. We demonstrated that the entire paradigm of space warfare needed to change." The assembled representatives watched as the hologram showed clips from the historic battle. Massive council ships, once symbols of ultimate power, being systematically dismantled by swarms of vessels too small to target effectively. The nanoswarm's ability to shift from tiny individual units to combined larger forms had rendered traditional combat doctrine obsolete. High Counselor Vextor, his crystalline form notably dimmer than before, spoke first. "You could have conquered us," he said. "Your hidden forces throughout our territory prove that. Why didn't you?" Intelligence Director Naira, now serving as the Council's Chief of Strategic Planning, answered before Isabella could. "Because that was never their goal. Humanity didn't want to replace one form of dominance with another. They wanted to change the fundamental balance of power." In Earth orbit, Commander Rajesh and Lieutenant Kira oversaw the implementation of the new defense protocols. The Joint Human Council training exercises showed how dramatically warfare had evolved. Traditional military vessels were being retrofitted with quantum technology, their crews learning to think in terms of swarm tactics rather than brute force. "It's still strange," Kira observed, watching a council cruiser practice breaking down into smaller component vessels, seeing them adapt so quickly to our way of thinking. "Survival is a powerful motivator," Rajesh replied. They realized that clinging to the old ways meant inevitable obsolescence. Lieutenant Wai Lin, now heading the Joint Species Training Program, worked with pilots from dozens of civilizations. Through neural interfaces, they learned to coordinate vast swarms of small ships, their minds linking across species barriers to achieve levels of cooperation previously thought impossible. "The key," he explained to his diverse class, "isn't the size of your ships or the power of your weapons. It's the ability to adapt, to change form and function as needed." Just as humanity's greatest victories often came from those who were underestimated, the future belongs to those who can turn perceived weakness into strength. In the quantum laboratories beneath Luna's surface, Dr. Rashid Rahman worked with a team of multi-species scientists, sharing the principles that had given humanity its edge. The quantum stealth technology, once Earth's most closely guarded secret, was being adapted for peaceful applications, revolutionizing everything from space travel to communications. The mistake, he told his colleagues, was thinking that advancement meant making things bigger. Nature taught us long ago that the most successful organisms aren't always the largest. They're the ones most capable of adaptation. Back in the council chamber, Isabella concluded her presentation. Earth doesn't seek to rule, she stated firmly. We seek to evolve. The nanoswarm technology will be shared with all species who agree to the new Galactic Charter. The era of protected status and enforced hierarchies is over. She gestured, and a hologram showed the new Galactic Defense Network taking shape. Fleets of small, highly adaptable ships working in concert, maintaining peace through cooperation rather than intimidation. The quantum communications grid that had once been used to infiltrate council space now served as the backbone of a new, more integrated galactic society. There will always be those who think that size equals power, Isabella continued. But we've proven that true strength lies in adaptation, in turning supposed limitations into advantages. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't our technology. It was our ability to think differently about the nature of power itself. Strategic Officer Amara presented the final phase of the transition. The old military doctrines were being replaced by a more flexible approach, emphasizing rapid response and adaptation over raw firepower. The massive shipyards that had once produced city-sized vessels were being converted to manufacture swarm units and quantum technology. We didn't just win a war, she explained. We initiated an evolution in how civilizations approach conflict and cooperation. The same principles that make the nanoswarm effective. Adaptation, cooperation, distributed power are reshaping galactic society itself. As the session concluded, Isabella looked out at the assembled representatives. Former enemies, now partners in building something new. The galaxy was changing, becoming more interconnected, more adaptable. Humanity's tiny fleet had done more than win a battle. It had transformed the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. In orbit above Earth, the combined fleets of 100 species practiced new formation patterns. Massive capital ships broke down into smaller components, their crews learning to think in terms of flexibility rather than raw power. The quantum grid hummed with the coordinated movements of millions of vessels, large and small, all working in harmony. The message that had started with a desperate bluff had become a new reality. In a universe of infinite possibilities, true strength lay not in size or power, but in the ability to adapt, to think differently, and to turn apparent weakness into unprecedented strength.